Hi, I'm Josh. I have with me Arun, who is a principal security engineer at Databricks. He and his team have built a tool built on top of the information from the Unity catalog and other areas of Databricks to make auditing your security footprint much easier. Take it away, Arun.
Thank you, Josue. By the way, beautiful office and shop that you set up. It looks very, very professional. So congrats to you.
Thank you.
And thanks for all the good work that you do for the community to keep the data and AI community abreast about various things that are happening. And happy to be here. As Josue said, my name is Arun Pamulapati. I am one of the leads at Databricks, at our security field engineering. And as a field tool, we built the security analysis tool for customers to use as a audit tool within their own environments and figure out if there are any deviations from the security best practices that we would like our customers to be aware of and practice. And based on the deviations, the tool actually provides specific recommendations which they can use to harden their workspaces. But before we jump into the specific tool, I want to kind of underscore some of the aspects that Josue mentioned, right? The data and AI is only useful for enterprises if that is actually done in a secure way, right? Like democratizing data and AI is the core pillar and mission for Databricks. So for democracy to work, you need to have people playing by the rules. If not, what you have is anarchy. That means enterprises cannot tolerate and use those systems if there are no, who can access what, when, and is this a least privileged approach to their data and AI assets. So with that in place, I would like to jump into what we provide as comprehensively for our customers. Then I will dial into security analysis tool. And as we've been talking about, and some of the things that Josue originally opened up with as a remark is that there are rise of threats because of the nature of how these new environments are deployed, especially being it as SaaS, and now add that the AI into the whole equation. There is tremendous value, but we need to think about some controls, right? Especially security controls. When we talk about security controls, sometimes for data and AI teams, it can come across as a hurdle, or it can be sometimes thought as slowing down. But for security teams, they want that to be actually necessary part of overall, building these applications, deploying into production for the specific reason of protecting their own organizations from these threat actors, right? So if you think of analogy of car, right? The thing that makes you go fast in a car as part of your car, infrastructure, for lack of a better word, is that brakes. Imagine you have the fastest car in your driveway without any brakes. It's a fancy car. And then you have, everyday car that I drive, something, below the road car that doesn't go fastest, but it has brakes. Which one would I be choosing to pick my kids from school? Even though it's a fancy car, I won't go and take it, right? Likewise, when you're deploying, any kind of application, enterprise application, you want to make sure you are taking advantage of the engine that is there. In Databricks Data Intelligence Platform, you have amazing engines out there to do any type of workload that you want to do on data and AI. But we also deliver the enterprise-grade security features. We want to make sure those are treated as brakes to kind of slow you down, make sure you are practicing these all of these properly, and you're deploying them so that you go slow to go fast, right? That way you can now trust the deployment. You can make sure the right people are accessing the environment. They are doing the required auditing and everything that goes around your deployment. To help our Databricks customers practice Databricks securely, we have the security best practices page where we take a structured approach to our security best practices. right? First, we help our customers define what good looks like when they follow security best practices on all of these three clouds, right? So we have this white paper where they, based on which cloud you are deploying Databricks on, we have extensively listed security checklists, and then, various links that they need to have for configuring and accomplishing those specific security configurations. And then they can basically reason with their own internal security teams, compliance teams, to see based on, if they are running security sensitive workloads and what kind of compliance they need to meet. Based on those, they would be able to go over the security checklist. And then, we kind of take even the threat modeling approach to help them deeply understand why these security configurations are important. And then at each one of those, security configurations, we provide detailed description of what that security configuration is about, why they should be having this, and even curated links to Databricks documentation, right? So for anything that you need to actually understand about Databricks security, and as a security practitioner within the enterprises, and even everyday Databricks admin, this is a nice comprehensive document that they can use to produce a good understanding and then deploy Databricks according to those security best practices, right? So once they have that, once they define, what security should look like, because not every customer need to deploy each of these, security best practices that we prescribe. Because, if you are digital native, forward-looking, early startup, you may not want, need to and would like to actually focus on, some of the things like compliant security profile. But if you are a HIPAA or like PCI customer who is in a regulatory environment, you need to deploy that specific way of having your hardened workspaces and with required compute in there with specific regulatory requirements, right? So the idea here is to kind of provide them with clear security best practices, and when and where you would be using which security configurations. Okay, so you start with those, and then you have clear list of security configurations that you need to deploy. But you don't need to hand build that. We provide security reference architecture as Terraform templates, so you can actually deploy by using this security as infrastructure as code, and then modify this if needed into your own security requirements. And then from the get-go, you can deploy your Databricks workspaces by using these Terraform templates, right? So what did we do? We have, first thing to use and understand the security best practices, and then follow the shared responsibility model to see which parts of the security configurations you as a customer need to understand, and actually which ones of those are applicable to your own situation. So once you have that, you can use Terraform templates to actually deploy according to those best practices. And then SAT, which is security analysis tool, would help you monitor for a period of time. You deploy these workspaces, and then am I staying according to those best practices? Did someone change my, one of the important configuration? And then you would be able to have, as of now, what is my security posture, right? According to the best practices that are out there. Are there any deviations from these best practices? So you can actually run this diagnostic tool and then get a picture, which I'm going to kind of, show as a demo in a bit, so that you have clear understanding of where there are deviations, if there are deviations. And then you get again, just like our security best practice white paper, you get curated links. Like when there is a deviation, you would be able to say, okay, this is where I need to go, and these are the configurations that I need to update, so that I am hardening again to make sure that I'm not deviating from those security best practices. So to run home, the point that I was trying to make with that, documentation page around, how organizations should reason about the security posture and what they should be paying attention to when they are practicing Databricks. As I said, Databricks Data Intelligence Platform provides enterprise grade, both the engine, in the analogy of car, as well as the controls that are needed, the brakes and, indicators and headlights and all, the security controls that are necessary, right? Our goal with this tooling is to kind of make that process easy, right? We are not introducing any new security controls. We're just providing you the visibility so that you make your practice of basically Databricks and hardening Databricks workspaces and meeting your compliance and regulatory requirements becomes a bit easier, right? So there are three legs to this tool in this, poor man's tool that I have here, is that the define process. So for define process, you're going to use security best practices docs that I showed you on the web page. So once you have that white paper, your team is fully dialed in and clearly understands what are the security best practices that I should be following. And then I introduce you to briefly, there is Terraform template. If you are inclined to do so, you can use that, or you can just deploy according to security Databricks deployment, click through way of deploying. Whatever that is, we prefer use our opinionated Terraform templates, but you can use whatever the method process of deploying workspaces that you have, right? And then, however you got there, right? You never heard of security best practices docs, you never heard of Terraform templates. Now you suddenly heard about, hey, there is an audit tool. And then I want to use. So these three are not necessary to be done in sequence. We prefer you do that, but you can use any one of these independent of each other, right? So now you can use security analysis tool to see if your team actually is following security best practices, and then ultimately make Databricks awesome for you at the end of the day to accomplish the actual mission that you have, and then focus on that and go fast. While kind of slowing down a little bit with security controls in place to address any of those threats that we talked about. So you're basically addressing those ahead of time instead of being reactive, you're being proactive, right? So our focus with this talk is about security analysis tool. What does it addresses? When customers ask us hey, how do I know if my team is following Databricks security best practices? The answer is security analysis tool to get that visibility through this diagnostic process that you can run. It's a field build tool. It is not part of Databricks product. So there is no support or SLAC at this point for this specific tool, but we have thousands of customers taking advantage of this tool in their workspaces to kind of get visibility, right? So what does it provide? So the first part on the left side, it actually verifies if you actually deployed Databricks workspace according to security best practices in a given account. In Azure, per subscription, you need to deploy one security analysis tool. In case of AWS and GCP, you will be deploying one security analysis deployment per your entire Databricks account. So it provides single pane of glass across your Databricks workspaces so that you have visibility into all of those workspaces that you have. And then it checks about 80 plus security checks it does, providing you visibility. And then if there are any deviations, it marks those, which I'll show you as part of a dashboard, right? And provides you guidance. This is the part that most customers love because these are curated links. So you do not need to hunt down in Databricks documentation. You get for each of these checks, this is where you need to go, and this is how you need to configure as part of your, either Databricks account or Databricks workspace. You would be able to get that guidance from this tool, right? So then we have more to this with security analysis tool, which is secret scanning, right? Some of the things that we would like to see with our customers as best practices, in addition to how you configure, is practicing Databricks safely. One of those is not hard coding your credentials inside of your notebooks or your cluster configurations. Eventually you are going to check in those notebooks into Git, and if your Git happen to be public, your credentials, the sensitive credentials, may end up in the public internet, which we want to fully avoid, right? So the mitigation for that is, you want to make sure those secrets are configured inside of Databricks secret scope, so that those are not in the plain kind of hard-coded and, be it Databricks API keys or PAT tokens, or even we scan for 80 plus different, potential security credentials that are out there, like, your AWS keys or anything that you may need to use for connecting and doing your, data, getting the data into Databricks or whatever the things like user ID passwords. We don't recommend you hard coding them. So that's what secret scanning is going to provide visibility into. So we scan through all of your notebooks, and then we put that information in a dashboard saying that, hey, these notebooks have hard coded credentials. Please clean those up before this becomes an incident for your organization, right? The third part to security analysis tool is permission analysis. So in this one, what we provide is we look at the users, I call them as principals, right? So principals can be users, groups, and service principals, and the resources. So resources can be Unity Catalog and data warehouse, data warehouse, or like workspaces. What are the permissions? So the relationship between these principals and resources is kind of important for making sure right people have right access and nothing more, right? So this is to help you accomplish least privilege when it comes to configuring your user base in the platform, right? So let's take a simple example. Josue is responsible for building a data product. So he should not be accounts admin in Databricks workspace. He should be his job is to have access to a Unity catalog, which is and a specific schema. So we want to make sure he has access to only those two things, and then access to a workspace, and then a compute that he needs, maybe a warehouse, right? But if you overprivilege them, because sometimes people may see that as easy, let's make him as an admin, then he has access to everything, right? Like, all the access controls, are available to, or most of the access controls that are in a workspace are available to an admin. So we want to give the visibility through this permission analysis tool so that you can actually see who has access to what they can do within that workspace, right? So if you take a step back, SAT does three things. One is, are the configurations of my Databricks environment, like, the security posture configurations, are they good according to security best practices, or are there any deviations? If there are deviations, how do I get to good, right? Like, what are the curated links so that I can actually go and harden that? The second part is, are my people practicing Databricks, simple things like maintaining credentials in a safe way, right? So that's secret scanning. The third one is, once these, the security configurations are good, as I onboard users, do they have the least privilege that we would like to see in a data and AI product? So this kind of boils down to agents. For example, if I give high, service account level privileged an agent, now we are talking about agent is trying to be helpful and trying to explore everything in your Unity catalog, as opposed to agent having access to specific schema, even to specific table, or even row level, column level. Kind of locking down those agents to a specific level would reduce the threat surface that you would have when somebody is trying to prompt that agent to accomplish a certain job, right, certain task. So with on behalf of OBO permissions that we have against agents, we want to make sure the agents are representing the user, and the user has permissions to read certain table or certain schema, and only that. So when agent is trying to be super helpful and trying to get you some HR data because it misunderstood your prompt, Unity Catalog is going to block that agent, saying, hey, your job is to get how many widgets did I sell? That's what the prompt is. But maybe you are trying to answer this question in a different way, or because you are trying to be helpful to grab more data for your end user, but you don't have access to those tables. So it is prevented at the source, as opposed to trusting that agent is going to do the right thing.
I personally really like the thought of using the permission analysis one, just because in my experience, that's where the biggest issues are. Like, in my experience, perhaps you find a few instances where the first two you talked about are relevant, but the permissioning, because we get so complacent with like, well, this person is in our company, so what's the worst thing that could happen? That can be a problem for a variety of reasons, and I know that is personally a feature that I've actually wanted Databricks to have built in for some time. So it's nice to have it at least covered through the tool to get that lineage, if you will, of permissions, not just tables and schemas and all the other data objects.
Excellent. Yeah, no, definitely that's what I'm hearing from customers, and eventually we'll get there. There are a bunch of these things in motion on the product side. Hopefully we'll see those, but we need to test these out and see what customers are actually showing interest, and making sure we provide them when they need them, and then slowly build these into eventually into the product also. So without instead of going through these screenshot by screenshot, I actually will walk you through the product itself, right? As part of the tooling. So if you deploy a security analysis tool, the first thing I was kind of talking about is the posture, right? So there are three things. I'm going to walk you through those three things as demo. The first one is posture. So when you deploy this in a given account, so here you are looking at my Databricks workspace. It has 4 actually workspaces in this account. So SIT found those 4 accounts, right? It listed them, and then it kind of gives you an executive summary. We don't have enough time to go into each one of those specifically, but we have more details on this on our GitHub around what these are about. We'll get into that in a bit, but the most important screen here is that when you actually have once you run this, you would be able to get deeper dive of that each of those workspaces. So now I want to understand how am I doing against Databricks security best practices, and if I have any deviation that I should be focusing on, right? So in this case, simple things things that we would like to see, and we'll summarize these as part of our closing remarks, but I would like to see for most customers, if they have IP allow list configured both for their account console as well as workspaces, right? So this is important because you're dictating where your users can come, which network they can come. And if you don't configure this, they can come from anywhere in the world to your workspace, right? They can basically reach. They may not be able to log in, but you are basically allowing and setting up yourself for anywhere in the world being able to access your workspace. With IP access list being in front-end IP access list being configured, you are restricting that to your VPN or your own organizational network. So now you are basically reducing that blast radius. And then we would like to see single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, so on and so forth, which we will go through. But the green means it is basically you configured, for example, here IP access list for workspaces is configured, so you got a good green check mark, right? Some of these are not everything that we find here necessarily means you need to immediately remediate. If you have IP allow list, you don't need to have front-end IP private connectivity, right? That's why we give that description in there that hey, you need to do one of the two. You don't need to do both. But workspace have proper network policy configuration. This is a deviation that's not configured. So what we are telling is, okay, you don't have this best practice. How do I accomplish what is, in this case, SEG, egress controls? With egress control you set up, you are basically saying, hey, the compute can only reach into my, again, you can configure where they can go out to, right? Basically you are telling, I want to restrict this to my corporate network or my, these are my destinations. Anything that is in Unity catalog, of course you can reach into that. Those are safe, right? But if you don't prevent that, they can reach into anywhere in the internet, right? So you want to restrict that to, first of all, you want to lock it down for all intents and purposes. But there may be reasons why some of this compute may need to reach some external API, like they need to read something and then munge your data with that, output of that endpoint. So you want to just configure, okay, I'm going to allow only to that endpoint so that you can read that API. I don't want this to go to Joe Smith's website or something, right? So things like that, we want to not only highlight, but we want to kind of give them curated links, right? That same thing goes to some of these configuration, like, we would like to see some of the scheme configured. So if they haven't configured, we want to see if we want SSO to be configured. If not, we are going to give them links to documentation. Hey, you didn't configure single sign-on, and here are the steps to configure, so that next time, once you complete that, next time when you run SAT, it becomes green, right? We want to set max lifetime on your tokens. Like, we don't want these tokens to end up there with unlimited time on them, right? So, each of these deviations are, elaborate and clearly descriptive, and then provides you with, documentation links and severity, which is a little bit of opinionated. You can change those if you want, because each organization may perceive these as different. Hey, I really do not care about certain things here because I'm not in that security sensitive space of compliance related workspaces, so I don't want to configure. For example, some of the data exfiltration things, like there is a check here if people can export their notebook. We mark it. Most customers do not need that to be disabled. You may want to actually allow your users to be able to export the notebooks or export the outputs of notebooks. But in HIPAA environment, sometimes some of those HIPAA regulations may say people should not be able to export the data. They need to be just solely leave that inside of workspaces. If they need something, they can visually come back and do it. They shouldn't be exporting that into their personal laptop or even company laptop, right? Personal laptop you can prevent with front-end IP allow list, right? So anyway, so this is a high-level summary about what you can glean from a given workspace. Likewise, we talked about secret scanner. This is actually, we are seeing this a little bit where irrespective of how many other ways we kind of educate in cybersecurity that, hey, your credentials should not be kept in plain, type hard coded into your notebooks or your code. You should be using certain types of secret store to access them, right? This is analogous to people putting their passwords in a Google Doc or something. We don't want that. You want to store that in some kind of, either a password tool, or you want to memorize them. You don't want to put them. But we want to be helpful. We want to be proactively customers to self-serve and make sure their teams are doing this, in a safe manner before this becomes a problem. Right, we don't want these secrets to be end up in the public kit. So in this case, this one found multiple secrets being hard coded into a cluster configuration as Spark environment variable. You will see likewise in the notebooks. If it is notebook, we see the notebook path. Right. So that's a high level summary. One point I want to highlight: all of this data, metadata that these tools produce are stored in customer environment. So we don't have any visibility. This is a tool that customers run in their own environment, and the output of this analysis also goes into their own Unity catalog, whatever the catalog they configure before they actually set up SAT, and before they run SAT, they would specify, hey, I want this data going to this specific catalog, and I want this to go into this specific schema. So we don't have visibility. So, and then this is available to people, people who actually should be looking at this, not for everybody in the company, right? So I just want to underscore that, because this is sensitive information. We don't want to get that to Databricks side of anything. It's all in the customer environment. Okay.
Now, Arun, I have to ask a question though. So you just covered a lot of security aspects, right? So, but here's the thing: what if I've passed SOC 2 and HITRUST compliance? Isn't that good enough?
Yeah. So SOC 2 and HITRUST are generally, right, looking at, for any given enterprise, looking at process, people, practices, and then of course some infrastructure definitely is in place. Those are all table stakes. Those are things that you should definitely aspire for, meet anyway. But the bad actor doesn't care if your SOC 2 on HIPAA, hey, I'm going to walk away from this, this enterprise or this particular, deployment because they are SOC 2 and HITRUST, right? They will take advantage of any and every exploit that is possible and available. So for them, they are like an indiscriminate, right? So it's good that you have that baseline because there are amazing things that you accomplish by meeting those bar. But we want to raise the bar higher because remember, we are talking about enterprise data for enterprise analytics, which we all know that your data is basically your intellectual property. And if you add on AI, you are putting your organizational intelligence on top of that data, your processes and all, and making those AI applications and agents much more smarter. So what is a better target, like sometimes for some of these people to than this kind of environment, right? So we want to make sure we are preventing or we are actually taking the steps to minimize any of those risks.
And what I want to underscore there too, especially for business decision makers, is that anything in security, anything is always going to have one little hole here, one little hole there. That's why security is a layered approach. It is a layer approach, and you add on layers covering any weaknesses from the underlying layer. So I just want to underscore that to your point. SOC 2, HITRUST, and any of the other ones that might be out there, they're a baseline, but don't take it as we're golden, either from the perspective of you as an individual with your own data, or even when you are evaluating vendors to get services from. Don't just necessarily take certifications as they are golden. Obviously, how you validate how good companies are in security, that's a whole other conversation. But just there's always risk, and you'll always do your due diligence.
100%. It's defense in depth. It's a work in progress, and we need to make sure we are doing everything that is humanly possible. Because, as they say in security, as an enterprise or as a good guy, you need to be right all the time. And then for the people who are basically bad actors, they need to be right one time, right? That's all it takes for that. So it's a kind of iterative process that you would need to definitely pay attention to. So we talked about two parts. I will quickly showcase the permission analysis tool because there are three parts to security analysis tool. The one is the posture, the other one is secret scanning, the third one is permission analysis tool. So permission analysis tool, again, as part of your deployment, as you do with SAT, you run a data collection job, which all of that is going to be stored inside of your Unity catalog, inside of your schema, and then you can use this tool to kind of get visibility into who can access what once they are inside the platform, right? So these are people that you actually granted, that you allow. These are not necessarily bad actors, right? These are the people, but insider threat is a problem. Over permissioning is a problem. In the world of agents, you definitely want those agents to be, behaving according to your resource access control definition, right? So what permission analysis tool does is, at a very high level, you can look from the point of view of a principal. So a principal can be user, group, and service principal. So what are all the things that this person or this group can access, right? So I want to investigate at a given point in time, what is this person? I have many accounts, which because it's a development environment. So this is the primary account that I use. So what is this person has access to? So the important part is this one actually shows not just data assets, because data is important part of your data and AI platform, but there are a lot of things around the data that actually kind of constitutes as your AI system, data and AI system, right? Like, the workspaces, the secrets, because if you have access to secret, you can use the secrets to get into the data. Warehouses, if you have access to warehouse, sometimes you can use that warehouse to query certain aspects of the data, so on and so forth. Of course, you need to have permissions on the catalog, right? So in this case, I have access to 22 catalogs. Within that catalog, I have many schemas. I have access to those tables we use, and so on and so forth. The compute that I have access, compute is money. So, should this person be having access to cluster create privileges, so on and so forth. You should be thinking about jobs. Again, jobs are underneath, like, they have access to certain data assets, right? So the idea here is to give you 360 degree of, like, what workspace this person has access to, and what catalogs and what data assets they have access to, right? So that's the first kind of thing that you can accomplish. So think of this as, like, looking at, somebody asks a question like, hey, in your organization, Hostway, like, so-and-so person been here for 6 months. They put in a, resignation letter. We want to make sure what are the things that they had access to when they were here, right? Because we want to make sure we remove access to certain things. So if you are using single sign-on scheme, if you remove them in your org level, that will automatically remove them from everything. But you want to, like, take a look before they leave, so that, like, you can have a discussion with them. Hey, we gave you access to certain sensitive data sets, and here are our policies. Like, when you leave the organization, we want you to adhere to our NDA, so on and so forth. The other thing is, somebody was, they're acting up, or they're doing, like, something that they shouldn't be doing, and you want to have a picture of what they have access to, right? Some of that you get from audit logs, some of that you get through these systems. So there may be a question around who has access to this catalog, right? So given the size of these organizations, sometimes it's very, very hard to know if everybody has access to, or if there are only few people have access to, and that would be important to kind of glean and then be able to report on that, right? So if I want to know about, like, I don't even know what I'm looking for, so I can just click on the catalog and then go through certain things like here, and then I can actually pick some of these catalogs. So let's go through this one, because there are more people should be having access to this, because it's a dev environment. So here I should be able to see more people who have permissions to, there are 22 users, there are one group, and then there are, like, 34 service principals have access to this particular catalog. So you want to get full picture of which of the principals have access to what resource. So the first one was what principal has access to what resources. The second one is which resource can be accessed by what three principals out there, right? The last one I would highlight, and then because we don't have time to go through all of them, is that escalation paths. This is my favorite one in this. Say, I want to know how far a given user group or a service principal is to becoming one of the highly privileged role in this environment. So, for example, if I want to see if this user is accounts admin, I can see that they are accounts admin, right? Do they need to be accounts admin? Because that comes with, huge amount of power or like privileges in the company. They are also Metastore admin. They're also, and they're Metastore admin through different means. Like, we basically, when I'm doing this analysis, we do graph-based analysis. So it is not the direct permissions that we grant to Hostway. It's about if your Hostway is part of a group and that group is part of another subgroup, and if that group is given certain privileges, we should be able to see the effective permissions that Hostway has through this analysis, right? So it's very, it's important that we look through what actually they can do, not what is visible from browsing through some of those. So this is what is exposing or like presenting. It may be intentionally. We want to just make sure they know that there are different highly privileged roles this person can get to. This is like, Spectrops, and there is a, Bloodhound. So we are taking that similar approach to analyze and then get through these inherited permissions and show to the organization that, hey, they can do all these things. Did you mean to have them at this level of permissions? And then there are other things like secret scopes, things like, you can go by, in this workspace, what are all the secrets, and who has access to certain secrets. You can basically find, and how did they get to those secrets, right? So we'll be able to find those also, right? So ultimately, the goal of this permission analysis tool is to give you the visibility once the user is basically authenticated, authorized. Remember, security. The posture check is, can they come to this workspace from your network? That's good. So you are kind of stopping anybody who is not on your network not to come into your workspace. Then, do they have privileges? Can they actually single sign on? Do they have multi-factor authentication? Right? So now they are in the workspace. Now we are saying, in defense in depth, should they be having access to this data? Because not everybody should be having access to every and all data sets that are available. So ultimately, what we are kind of converging towards is to your original opening remark, right? Data and AI is going to, and the analytics on this, these data sets, and through AI, especially on the agencies, opening up huge value, right? But you need to make sure you are following in the shared responsibility model, practicing the platform's security capabilities by taking a little bit of pause and making sure you apply those guardrails or the controls in place, and then you go fast from there. Because now that you actually deployed account to security best practices, you can crank up many use cases, AI agents and AI applications, because you are feeling comfortable and safe by following and by using this tooling, that things are looked at, things are actually being practiced according to the best practices. Now, you can, imagine the things that you always wanted to do and go at the speed that the platform allows you to. In that analogy, if your fancy fast car has solid brakes and then those brakes are checked, now you can go at the full velocity, because you know that if something happens, you can hit the brake and you can stop, and you and your kids are safe in that, right? So that's what we are kind of converging, trying to do here with this overall tooling. So the call to action for people is that, this tooling is available for you all to basically get. You can go to SAT, and then you can see what we are talking about in depth, and then you can download as part of your workspace and follow the instructions to set up. And if there are any questions, if you got stuck or whatnot, you can actually ask for help.
Well, thank you so very much for your time, Arun. I think that was extremely helpful. And, security is one of those things that people like the idea of. They don't necessarily like doing the work of it. So I think it's very nice that I think you simplify that based on what you've built, which is built on top of Unity Catalog and the system tables and all that fun stuff. So very good stuff. I appreciate your time, and hopefully this is valuable to those that are watching.
Thank you. It's been a great team effort, and thank you, Oswald, for us to shine, and the team that helped build SAT to shine the work and get it to hands of many of our customers. Really appreciate it.